we don't have a quorum tonight anyway.
We don't have a quorum right now, but I'm turning on in case.
Oh, okay.
Someone's going to be coming in live. So that is live going on right now, so don't crack any jokes.
No, I wasn't able to make it home, but some of those,
Oh, he's a IT guy.
Oh, okay.
the runoff plan that you guys have for Johnson's Pond that you sent us, it was
Did I
a,
send you something?
yeah, it was right after the last meeting. It was pictures of the runoff and drainage, storm drainage from Johnson's Pond or on Johnson's Pond from, say, Wood Estates and everywhere else. It only showed 2 inlets or 2 outlets flowing into the pond. You actually look at it or you know the area, they are everywhere.
Okay.
And we're talking concrete
Is
structures.
it just the article from,
I printed it off and highlighted where they all are and not where they all are, but
the ones that you know?
the ones that, okay, 2 of them is the first spots that the algae had formed.
Okay.
That was where they found it.
They haven't been cleared down there yet, have they?
Hmm?
They haven't been cleared.
We won't be clear. You have to get the top water to move, and you can't get the top water to move when we're 3.5 feet below spillway.
I mean, in our little lake, we have the same problem, but we don't have cyanobacteria, thank goodness. But, yeah, it's horrible down there.
It's actually just about as low as it was when my house caught on fire, and they couldn't get the fire hose into the pond, which I think is more now of a, it should be more than anything else we're worrying about, people's safety and safety of homes.
So right now, that, when it says Cody, that's just us.
Mhm.
So, people should be able to come in automatically. If not, if you see someone up there looking to come in, wait, because I can get a lot of them, but no one else is here. So, did we hear from,
No, as a matter of fact, Dina,
Jane, I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, thank you.
I'm
I haven't
checking.
heard from her at all, unless she left a voicemail message. I haven't listened to my voicemails.
I would have thought that if she was gonna send something. No, I haven't seen anything. Student might be quite short after all.
I just got
So,
I just got out of a meeting and I was told I had to head to New York tonight, so.
Whereabouts in New York?
Right outside of Lake George.
Oh, up north.
Oh,
Nice.
yes.
Joe, did you take my camera? No.
Oh, they can hear us.
Yes, well, the important thing is the minute taker.
So when she join, would I see her?
The minute taker? No, after, what we do is after.
Oh, you
these
record
meetings,
it and then
we
she
record
takes
it
it, yeah.
and Upload it to our YouTube and makes it available.
Yeah, see, we got a minute's transcriber, so you don't even have to.
It's just like it.
Can't beat that.
I mean, making the job easy.
But if Deanna does come and we start a meeting up just a couple times, make sure we say who we are so that the minute taker can
Yeah.
identify us.
Is it Dina or Deanna? I think it's Dina. Deana is
Sorry,
Dina.
I have to use everybody's name regularly,
Yeah.
otherwise I lose it. So I'm great with faces.
Yeah, I haven't seen an email from her. And I'll call.
Okay. And I honestly haven't checked my voicemail for a couple of, I took 2 days off and it's taken me 2 weeks to catch up.
Yeah.
You probably know. You probably can't take a day off.
Good night, guys.
Take care, Joe.
Nope.
So I would say we can wait till like 6:10, 6:15. When you have to go, obviously. And then I think that Jerry will be interviewed on the whenever the next council meeting is. I think it's the 22nd.
Oh, okay, so then he could come in on the 14th
We'll be
of
here for your next
September.
month's meeting.
Yeah, all right.
And then that will be good too. So in case someone goes on summer vacation or school starts or whatever it might be, that as long as there's 3 here before, we can manage to move forward. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I know you're trying to wrap up your day if you need to.
My days are never wrapped up. I've learned that. I've been in municipal government too long to think that my day ends. It's just, you just have to learn to stop doing something at a certain point, find the break in the day,
Oh,
go
yeah.
home and just
Pick
up where you
it
left
back
off,
up
right?
in the morning.
Yeah. I've always struggled with, I am a type of person that likes to come into work with the knowledge of what I need, feel that I need to do and get done and all that. And I get really personally upset if I don't get those things done. And you can imagine in municipal government, I can't just sit at my desk and do the things that I want to do that day. I can start them, but inevitably you get a call, you get an email, someone walks in off the street all the time. And that it took me a long part of my career to get used to that, where it doesn't matter what you think, because I would feel like I wasn't productive, because my level of productivity was based on, did I get done those things that I wanted to do in the beginning of the day? But I wasn't counting all those interruptions of the things that you did on top of that. So it took a long time to get over that, to say that part of your job is that interruptive email, phone call, someone stopping in, and it's okay to take credit for that, even though you didn't do the things that you thought that you were going to work on that particular day. Obviously, it's, if you got a deadline or something from your town manager or whatever, you gotta find the time to do that, plus the other things, so that you get the sense of accomplishment of both. But can't put yourself down for those interferences.
My coaches and mentors used to tell me, Tom, you have to learn how to get lost.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
So getting lost, you can get lost across the street.
Uh-huh.
Hey, Deanna,
Hi,
how are you?
sorry, there's traffic from Providence.
No problem. We're already live, so with regard to Zoom and all that, no one else is here, but it is being recorded, so can't tell any bad jokes. Or anything like that. I know that Matt has to leave early, so
Okay.
any of the business related stuff, Tom, we should get done early. Dina, you're the only woman here, so the person taking minutes, we don't have the benefit of a video right here. So obviously our minute taker can tell that it's you.
Okay,
When you speak,
sure.
but just at least when we sort of start up, I'm her Dirk, the guy that is talking too
Sure.
much right now, and the planning director. And then Tom and Matt, why don't you introduce yourself so the minute taker can at least identify your voices when she does the minutes.
Sure. Hi, Tom Pendergast. I'm the chair for this commission.
Hi, Matt Toll. I'm the secretary.
So, and Matt appreciates the fact that we have someone helping him with the minutes, right? Yeah, he's very happy.
All right, so we're recording, the minutes are done. So they were called to order 6:08. And in attendance, as we said, Tom, Dina, it's Dina,
Dina,
right?
yep.
Dina and Matt. We had a discussion about Jerry. Jerry is still pending. Hopefully he can get into the next town council meeting and be with us next month. But right now it's 3 and there are 3 of us here. Emergency evacuation through that door all the way to the end, and then either way from
You
there.
can also go out this door
Oh,
here.
secret
There's
door.
actually 2 doors you can go out. You can't come back in, but we can leave this way.
All right. Approval of the minutes. Did you have a chance to take a look at the minutes from last?
Mhm.
Comfortable with them? Any changes?
Nope.
Okay, so the meeting minutes from the 13th of July are approved. A few organizational matters I just wanted to bring up to the group. Herb and I had a conversation on the 27th of July. We discussed future meetings, typical conflict of interest and kind of protocols around that. And then also guidance around what do we want to be when we start getting rolling. So we've got kind of a blank slate, and I think we can kind of mold that to what we think would be a good impact on the town. I also met Gail Hardink. So Gail is administration here, and we talked about setting the timing of the meetings, which are the second Wednesday of every month. And then also the minutes, and we've got a minutes taker, which would be great. She'll take the conversation that we do here and she'll transcribe them for us. And then also agendas. So the timing on agendas. So anything that we want to get onto the agenda, we need to get to her like a week in advance at the latest, to be sure that we make that agenda. She puts the agenda together for us. But it's based on the content that we want to cover during the meeting. So, and then I did attend the Planning Commission meeting on the 27th, mostly for my benefit to get a better understanding of how these meetings go. Their meeting was chock full with agenda items. So, but that was it was good for me. Anything that I missed on organization matters? Just getting started. Old business for discussion. So while you're here, are we tracking mandatory training? Do we have to prove a certification on the training, or?
So basically all you have to do right now, there's some new stuff that you'll have to do beginning January of 2023. Which deals with some sustainability, rising waters, et cetera, et cetera. You know, sort of changing planet issues. So right now, you basically need to basically do the Open Meeting Act and the Public Records Act stuff. I think I sent you folks did I send a link that basically all you really have to do is just watch that video and just let me know, and then I'll let Joanne know. You're probably exempt with all your lawyerly degrees, Dina, but
I watched it anyway.
That's good. So maybe there's, I kind of think it's kind of cool, especially the handbook that they have, because it has all the cases that the AG's office has dealt with, and each one is a little lesson unto itself. So it's kind of fun to go through that. Just for me anyway. I've been in municipal government for 35 years. So those are the things that excite me, right? So so all you have to do is just do that, and it's sometime within the course of, frankly, a year. So just because you haven't done it yet doesn't mean that you can't participate, or that someone's going to slap you in jail or anything like that. But at some point, somebody may ask us, hey, when have your commissioners done this sort of thing? And I'd rather say, here's the sheet, they've all done it, rather than say, oh yeah, I got to go pick on Matt or Tom or whatever to go get this done, and then try to you know, hold you through the process. So you guys can do that stuff on your own, and just let me know.
Okay.
All right.
Good. Continued discussion of application review thresholds. So commission objectives. We had an initial conversation of some of the broader topics. Herb and I got a little bit more detailed as far as whether or not we want to have influence, or at least review some of the work that's being done by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Sewer Commission. They kind of go along with some of the topics that we talked about last month, which is wastewater and stormwater. So what we did was we kind of looked at a couple of examples. So if we were going to look at planning documents or have influence, or at least be involved with sewer, Herb gave us 2 documents that would be the types of things that we would look at and weigh in on. You're probably familiar with this one already. I looked at this one this morning. You could take, I don't know if you've seen it, take a look at it. So that's the commercial document, and that is a property up on New London Avenue, on Yeah, New London Avenue, behind the Dunkin' Donuts.
Mm.
So I actually drove by there and I looked at it. It's a vacant lot. It's covered in brush and trees, and it's surrounded by a broken chain link fence. And they want to put 3 tenants into a new building there that's in that plaza where the Dunkin' Donuts and Cumberland Farms is.
Mhm.
And it's, to me, I look at something like that. I wouldn't even weigh in on it because it's exactly, from a conservation perspective, it's exactly what we want. And that's for these commercial buildings to be in a central area and not in a zone in Western Coventry, for example. So, but this is an example of something that if we wanted to weigh in, but what is the criteria for weighing in? Because obviously we're not going to weigh in on every single thing that the planning commission is going to take a look at. As another example, last month when I attended their meeting, one of the things that they were weighing in on is whether a guy could put a second floor on his house, and whether his septic system was rated for a 5-bedroom house instead of a 2-bedroom house. So I don't think we want to get involved in those types of things, but what would be the thresholds that we might want to weigh in on?
You certainly have talked about the western side of Coventry, stormwater, wastewater related issues. So somehow there's maybe some trigger mechanisms that in your mind say, you know, why stormwater? Obviously, the protection of when you mentioned the stormwater issues, Matt, it was talking about, you know, the water quality of the various lakes and reservoirs that we have from that standpoint, and either improving or not letting it get any worse. We're trying to,
Or updating.
right.
Updating with water oil separators right before it drains into the pond.
Mhm.
The way it's all now designed.
And what might be interesting is not necessarily a function of participating in a development review, but to have a recommendation, say, to my office that says, hey, Herb, when you're doing the development review, would you please make sure that projects have oil waste separators as part of any of their, you know, don't have them put a floor drain into a garage, just have it be sloped in so that if there is a little spill or some oil, it's not going into the groundwater. Or if there has to be a floor drain that you've got an oil separator before it goes into some kind of a leach field or the wastewater system.
See, I know it's,
So sort of like a specification.
I want to go back to this blueprint for a minute, which is the Dunkin' Donuts.
Mhm.
But when you look at this, I understand it's not right to tell a person they can't build what they want to build. But if you look across the street and you see the 3 empty buildings
Mhm.
that this place is looking right at, and all we're doing is cutting down more trees, or we're redeveloping something that was already been torn down that was at once developed.
Mhm.
I don't see how we're gaining anything in the town, because we still have vacant places everywhere. We have a concrete jungle. It looks like Mattapan, where I've been working. It's just empty buildings everywhere. And we're just allowing more buildings to go up just to be empty.
And outside of the development process, that might be something to make a recommendation to my office. Then when we're updating stuff, are there incentives that might be able to be written into regulations that allow for infill or adaptive reuse of buildings that are vacant or in between 2 buildings or something that are there, that makes sense to do that, rather than something, I get what you're saying, that again, so part of your work could be beyond development review, going in and making policy suggestions that we might be able to find some of those incentives to fill in some of these vacant facilities. Sidebar to this is that even though there's a little historic cemetery on the Dunkin' Donuts site, it's adjacent to the thing that's here. And one of the main reasons why I brought this to your attention is because I knew that you would say this may not be one that is really in, you know, that we really want to have under our purview. But it is important to note that, you know, the little cemetery here is important to protect, and that if we're going to put another development up next to this, Dunkin' Donuts was, required to protect that area from that standpoint, want to make sure that, the buffer does kind of go into the property a little bit, that we would do that. Again, a little thing, but sometimes your trigger mechanisms may, if you have a trigger that says this is not a development that we want to deal with, but it may have some component piece of it that you're interested in. So the caution to the wind is be careful what your triggers are, in that it may be that on a rotating basis or something, each of you could say, I'm going to go into it's Tom's turn to come in this month or something, and look at the applications that came in the door to see if there is something like that, even though it doesn't trigger your review process, unless that person on a rotational basis says, hey, there's a cemetery there. I think we ought to, at least as a group, say that we should ensure protection of that cemetery. Maybe that's it. And you just shoot an email off to Herb to say, this is what it is. Got nothing, it's not meeting our trigger, but we do notice that there's something there, or that nothing that we're interested in, but we know that there's a larger trail plan, and the right of way that goes by the front of this is within the bounds of that plan. So we hope that you will, make sure that there's a 15-foot right of way for a non-motorized trail system. So if that trail is ever realized, you've already got the right of way. I do that automatically in every development anyway, but that's an example of something like that. I'm not saying anything's bad, you shouldn't do whatever. It's sort of that little caution to the wind, that if you decide not to do something, if you stick strictly to your trigger mechanisms or your threshold amount levels, something might slip through. I don't think you have to watch everything. I mean, that's part of my job, right, is to watch for that stuff. Or if I may say, oh, I know this doesn't meet your trigger, but hey guys, there's a cemetery on there. You might want to shoot me an email about whether that's important to protect or part of your thing. So I think there's a two-way street that we can work at here.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of babble there, but that's one reason why I just put this on the table.
So is that like an internal list of triggers, or a formal list, or is it more informal to say we want to watch for anything that's near a lake, anything that's got historic value, anything that might be in conflict with other structures that already exist?
Right.
Or
I think it's just one of those things, you guys have to decide what are your mechanisms for, threshold limits and all that. But give me that list as well, so that as I'm going through certain things, if I see something, I can alert you to it or what have you, and that may save from one of you having to come in and go through and look at something from that standpoint. So many of the issues might already be in our criteria for what we do our review on. What I do for every development is for a subdivision, I literally plunk the subdivision regs next to me, because I don't have them memorized, never will. And I literally go through every page and I just go through and say, oh yeah, I got to do trails, or I got to do this and that. So I've got the design, I go through the design criteria every single time. Subdivision is a little more difficult because those things are smattered throughout the entire process, depending on which step in the process you're at. The development review is a little different because it's a one-step process. All the criteria are there. I'll sit there with the zoning regs open, and I will go through and just follow the criteria through from that standpoint. And then there's other stuff based on the type of development it is that might have to shift somewhere else in the zoning. But that's generally the way I do it. And then on top of that is just my experience in I'm big on street trees. I'm big on having non-motorized easements protected on say the fronts of the property adjacent to a street. So if someday we ever had a trails committee and they wanted an overall map system, that it's a lot easier to already have the easement on the parcel 100 years from now than it is to build at both ends and all of a sudden have to negotiate with somebody about getting an easement from that standpoint. Planner extortion, but
yeah,
that's
The town does not negotiate, they just take.
But again, the idea is to try to anticipate, what are some of the goals, what is the implementation of the comprehensive plan. That's why, I'm excited that Coventry's finally going to have a comprehensive plan at some point, probably in 2023. And you haven't had one for 20 years. And those are the kind of things that give you that background, that backdrop to saying where I can come into development review and say, some people would say planner extortion, like I just used the term, but on the same token, it gives me the defense to say, hey, if we do have a bike path in the future that's looking to go this way, and developments come in that are on some of those parcels for that, it's good to try to secure that easement, right? And otherwise, it's hard to argue the need for it because I don't have the backdrop plan to defend my request. But I do get that a lot of developers say, yep, just put it in, I want the permit, right? So they, you can kind of push your way through, but I don't like to do that unless I've got the backdrop or the justification for it, so.
All right, so we can get more active and I'll start the process to come in and take a look at some of the actions that planning is going to have coming up.
Mhm.
And then I think the more we look at things, the more we'll start putting together what those triggers might be for us to watch for.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a work in progress, clearly.
Okay.
You guys are new and getting together. You aren't quite gelled yet. I'm getting to know you as well because I'm still new in the position, and we can just do it. But I think in general, the more you can just kind of jot things down, there's just in terms of the interests and all that, and eventually maybe we can put a little muscle around the skeleton, and perhaps it's creating a policy for review for the Conservation Commission, something like that you have. And I'm happy to help draft where I can and all that sort of stuff.
All right. Right, there was a second document was residential. So this is on Hopkins Hollow. I looked at it. It's in proximity of Arnold Pond and Carbuncle Pond. So it's like diagonally between those two. I don't know what the distance is because those maybe not all to scale, those little corner pieces. But I know that's something, David, that you had talked about before last month in an area. So if we were to look at something like that, what would we be looking for as possible triggers to say we have a position on this, as an example? Are they cutting down too many trees? Are they too close to Carbuncle Pond? Are they slated for sewers?
Well, one thing that has to be looked at is you have to look at making sure. One thing I noticed, especially being in the business, LOD means nothing. LOD is just a suggestion. But in these cases, being around a pond, being in a watershed, stuff like this, LODs have to be respected. All natural vegetation has to stay. You just want to make sure anything is okay to do as long as you follow the correct parameters and stay within that balance. And the way I look at it, everybody has a different viewing of it.
Yep. So from my perspective, that when I first look at this as a planner, I don't like it. One, it's out in the more toward the western side of the community, so the neighbors are probably going to be all ripped. For the first thing, they're here, they want to pull up the drawbridge, right? This is the former camp, as I understand. And what I want to do in this particular instance is try to retain the neighborhood character of the western area of town and all that, while respecting the fact that people have the right to develop their property. So for me, I want to cluster this. I see this as just they want to. The reason why this is like this is that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lots, 7 that are going to be developed, 1 for open space. The only reason why there's open space in here is because they couldn't get any more road frontage in here without having to build a public road. The public road creates additional road frontage. So what they did is they took the road frontage, they divided it up by the minimum that they needed and created the number of lots that they needed with some access to the back lot, just in case, but with the idea that this is going to be protected in open space. For me, I'm like, okay, fine. What if we try to cluster this? We do have in our regulations a cluster provision that allows to give them a density bonus. I actually have recommended in my thing back to them. I actually think this was on the Planning Commission's agenda at the last time, I think as a pre-app, or I just wrote it up. But so the idea was to cluster down in here. So it allows, because this scale is a little bit funky. There's a lot of space that's here. And the idea is to cluster to try to move things away, move it back. So I've got a little bit of, they started to put some kind of a buffer in here. The attorney knows that some of these folks are going to be angry from the start. So they've already tried to buffer it back. I've suggested not only the buffer, but to have my little non-motorized easement right of easement there, which adds a little bit of an extra buffer up there, and then move it a little bit further away, get it clustered, try to protect some more of the open space. And so that's kind of where I would think that the Conservation Commission would come in. They would go at this and say, this is just, someone's just trying to get as many lots as they possibly can on there with the dimensional requirements that are there. And so it's a little bit not thoughtless, but it's more about trying to maximize with it the easiest way that possibly can be without trying to look at things. And the way that I'm recommending that they do it is say, if you cluster it, there's an additional lot that you can get out. There's a whole different house that you can get out there. So even though you might have to have some more infrastructure out there to handle that, you're at least given another building lot to have, which generates some additional income in terms of that.
That's the more affordable approach.
Correct.
But if you do the cluster, you can actually turn that into more of a green approach.
Yeah.
With the catch basins, with having retention ponds, everything else.
Right. There's individual wells, individual detention things for all that. If you do a little clustering, just like Matt's saying, it's perfect. You might be able to get away with just 2 or 3 wells, in a regional approach versus individual wells for every single house that's there.
Cistern.
Yep. It's within the bounds of DEM, Department of Environmental Management. But I think there's some possibilities to deal with that. And then I think that helps to, I think it encourages good development, encourages good discussion. I think the neighbors would see an attempt to do right. Although there's some neighbors out there that probably will just fight it no matter what happens.
They shoot first out there, ask questions later.
Right. So, yeah. And then what I try to do too, at least in my review, is in a pre-application process. I not only in the traditional way that we do it in town is that whatever comes in as long as it meets the regs, it meets the regs. If there's deficiencies in the checklist, it's not deemed complete until they complete that, but it still kind of moves forward. What I like to do is, as part of if I write up a deficiency letter that it's not a complete application, I'll put all the other things that I expect to see in the future. I expect you to deal with street trees. I want you to cluster it. I want you to try to regionalize some of the services of, just like we were talking about in terms of wells and stormwater detention type stuff, do a better job of protecting the open space, have the trail easement. It's not required as part of making the complete application, but they know in that pre-application process what I'm going to be recommending at preliminary and final plan from that standpoint. So at least they know where I'm headed. And to me, I don't care. I want them to know, right? I'm not trying to hold things close to my vest pocket. And then ultimately, if they disagree on doing that, at least what we have before the Planning Commission are the points that we agree to disagree on, meaning the only things the Planning Commission needs to talk about. Everything else is assumed to be okay, subject to who shows up for the public hearing and the neighbors and all that. That's always a little bit of a crapshoot. But at least in terms of the applicant and staff, we're kind of on the same page. That's why I brought, so that's kind of why I brought this one in, because this is a good one that you guys would probably say, yeah, this one triggers the need to maybe look at some review. That one I was trying to more tricky on a little bit because of just the cemetery that was there. But this to me is one that I think it would trigger you in wanting to make some comments.
I completely see where you're going here.
Mhm.
I didn't see a trigger at all.
Really?
So that's,
Interesting.
but I'm not trained
And,
to be.
right, and I'm not trying, and I
so
hopefully you don't get the sense I'm trying to show you up. I'm just trying to give you, yeah, okay.
Well, it's
I need this because I wouldn't have thought of that.
Because this is what's happening to the western side of Coventry.
Well, this is what happened near my house.
That's what you,
This is
exactly why I brought this up too.
what
Yeah.
it
And this
looks
buffer that
like.
you were speaking of, what they do, the boys does it, they all do it. It's a 50-foot buffer that they clear the trees right off the road for
Yeah,
viewing.
that's what they
And then they
did.
leave another 75 or 80 feet of trees before the house,
Mhm.
and then the house, and they call it, it's a buffer.
What I'm trying to do is, yes, I'm creating an easement
In
for
and out.
non-motorized vehicles, in the future, a trail system, which this kind of neighborhood would embrace eventually,
Mhm.
right? They might not right away, but they would be walking it every single day with their dogs, even if they hated it. But the buffer in there is that there is a requirement for street trees in our regulations. Out in Western Coventry, I've already been challenged a couple times they've laughed at me to say, why are you requiring the street tree? Because that's what your regs require. No one has just paid attention to it, but I'm big on street trees. And I don't allow you to go out and just pull the little sugar maple out of the woods and plant it. You got to go get something that's a minimum 2-inch caliper planted out there so that in 2 years, you'll see some significant growth if it's taken care of, which is part of the specifications. And then instead of these things that are, little spindly things that you plant, it takes 10 years to get it to a 2 or 3-inch caliper. If you plant it at 2 or 3-inch caliper in 10 years, you'll see the thing like this. So it's a time frame that it really starts to take off. The other piece of that is to say, yes, I'm requiring you to do the street tree. However, if you're seeking a waiver of that, which is part of the process of that, is to say, great, you're out in Western Coventry, this is all forested from that standpoint. Tell me out there, which is going to be the area that you're going to protect in lieu of putting your street trees out there. And that's where, yeah, there's going to be a buffer, but the buffer is going to be sort of the street trees, and you can't go and cut all those down or something. If they go in and do it, well, guess what? You're planting street trees, or you're going to fix your landscaping plan because you did it illegally, and it's part of your, either within the warranty period, or it's part of your condo docs that go from that. And that's also when you cluster it, you can get some condo docs. I don't like associations and all that sort of stuff personally, but with regard to a community trying to work with a group of property owners, when you have the condo docs, you're dealing with one association, one set of people, rather than 6 or 7 individual people that just don't really, they generally don't understand, but in an association they have to. So, but that's exactly it in terms of that. So that's where when I try to create a buffer, it's trying to create a buffer, and with intent to either protect wildlife, to create a vegetative buffer to separate neighbors, or at least visually separate neighbors, and to meet other things like street tree requirements and all that. So that's interesting that one, I would have thought that you guys would have jumped all over that one right away, but. So, but that's good, for me, that's great, because that gives me an understanding of what I was exactly trying to do today, was just to kind of put some stuff in front of you and give you a sense of what's going on. And maybe I'm just trying to think of next steps in this. I don't have like a planning and zoning cheat sheet of review criteria, right? I mean, I just gained this stuff over the years, but if I'll look around and see if there's something I can't find, even if it's just from like a different town or something, that would be some kind of a cheat sheet or what other. I went around and looked at other conservation commissions, and their webpage stuff is just really basic. And
But those are the types of triggers that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So you look at this and you go, oh, there's 6 triggers there for you. Right. And then there's the cemetery, which is a trigger, right? It's, oh, it's these here, these 4 triggers, it's this trigger.
Right.
That's something that
Right.
just gonna take time to.
Right. To me, that one for
Understand.
you is kind of like, no, we don't really need to look at that, but there's something on there that may be of particular interest. I didn't
Okay,
have,
'cause
I
looked
didn't
at
have
it
an
and I said,
existing
wow, this is
application.
a vacant lot
Yeah.
that hasn't been taken care of at all.
Right.
It's completely run down and they're gonna build something there, I'd say, and it's in the New England center, that whole section, so
Right.
then that's fine. And then Matt, you say, well, wait a minute.
Right. You know,
His
what,
building's right across the
I
street.
know,
are you
why aren't they
doing this?
infilling across the street?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and, you know, I look at that and I go, that, right, that says Starbucks all over it to me, right?
Right behind
And,
the Dunkin' Donuts.
and it's next to the Dunkin' Donuts. It's right off the turnpike. It's on the side of the road that people want it to be on that are in those kinds of business. That's why Dunkin' Donuts is on that side of the road, not as an infill on the other. So that's why, and there is a drive-through proposed there, and it says a little coffee shop on it, but it doesn't say Starbucks, but it just goes ding, 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 because there's no Starbucks in Coventry, right? So they're looking for one. So that's sort of, so that stands out to me from that. So I understand why they're on that side of the road, but I totally agree with Matt in terms of that. And that's why that was really great that you said that, because that's a trigger to me, back to me today to say, you know, it would be kind of cool to put some kind of incentive program into our regulations to try to do that, because that's just a basic economic development tool that would be helpful. And so thank you for that, Matt. But again, that was sort of the sneaky way of here's something that's going on, that just to try to show, and that's an existing one. That's not that you'd be interested in cemeteries per se, but maybe if there was like a little duck pond or something there, or some kind of an inlet outlet to an important reservoir down the road or something like that, and stormwater was dumping into it. You know, not a big, huge thing, but could have a huge impact depending on the use that's there. Because just traffic parked drips, gasoline and oil and other products like windshield washer fluid and all that just washes right into the system eventually on an impervious surface. This one I thought would be a no-brainer because it's out in the western area. It looks a little developy, right? This is, if you've been, to me, Western Coventry is considered almost sacred from you know, at least the people that have talked to me from that standpoint. Yet there's a lot of folks that are saying that weren't here 5 years ago, but they live out there, and each one of these little things that's coming in is making it look, this looks a lot like, you know, Eastern Coventry, right? Small lots, same little pattern to them
Route
from that
116
standpoint.
is exactly like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Short, small fronts,
Right.
long backs.
Yep. So, you know, Western Coventry is very appealing to folks that can afford to live out there and do that kind of stuff. And you've got a few, especially some, you know, not bad mouthing Matt, but there's a few developers in town that see it and know what it is out there. And every time they get an opportunity to work with a property owner or a landowner, they're going to do something like that. Yep. And it's really, they really understand the value of Western Coventry, but they're capitalizing on it.
All right, I think, so we've kind of commingled 6 and 7 together since we don't have new business. We may have future business, but I think the idea of wastewater and stormwater, that all fits into this. We have to decide as a group what our triggers are. I think we got a good explanation and a good better understanding of what it is that we need to be looking for. And we may want to publish things like that. So we'll take some time and work on that. So I would say that's certainly one of our future agenda items, is to continue to hone in on those and work on them. There are 2 documents that I would recommend that go along well. They're in the comprehensive plan, and they work well with what it is that we would be looking for in the future from a town. So one is it's called land use ECNO, And then that's the other one is the Recreation and Open Space CCNO. So those two documents do a really good job of describing Coventry in detail. So especially things like the recreation open spaces, there's an inventory of all the water bodies in there and its condition. So those types of documents, those two, and I think eventually will be extremely aligned with the comprehensive plan as they start working on their goals. So those are two documents that I would recommend taking a look at. I just happen to be on the advisory committee, so I see those documents already. So you may want to take a look at that.
I emailed you guys the sections, didn't I? Okay, I'm sure I did. That's a month is a long time ago for me.
Okay, future agenda items. Triggers. I think I'll work with Gail to figure out the right time to come and take a look at some of the items that are on the planning agenda. Well, before the agenda, right? Because once they get on the agenda, it's too late. So it's got to be before. So those things that are in process that are still before what the planning commission is going to take a look at. So I'll work with Gail on that as an action item as well. How would we get involved with the sewer commission? Is
They
there an
meet the same
active,
time, they're meeting right now.
is it an active commission?
Yeah, well, the commission itself is, I would say it's probably more of on an as needed basis, as they may get an application for something, and there's not a lot of sewer
Right.
in town at this point, tons of capacity, just not the infrastructure to supply it. So they do meet on occasion. Right now, what's going on, however, is we have a consultant, Fussin O'Neill, I think, that we hired to update the facility capacity plan, sort of the facilities plan that it's, if you go off to the sewer component of our webpage, there's a 2006, there's a whole bunch of 2016, 2017 documents like that relate to the sewer and the facilities plan and all that. We're in the process of kind of going through all of that, because I think what we want to try to do as a community is either use some of our ARPA funds to do some infrastructure improvements, and ensure that the past stuff remains valid or needs to be updated. But the idea is to get off the dime and try to get some of this capacity in play. So that the group that I'm talking about meets the exact same time that you do. That's why last time we met, I had to turn the tape off because they needed it over their way. So there is opportunity, sorry for I'm being long-winded tonight. There is opportunity to participate in that process. I can't tell you exactly how right now. I know that there are going to be some public meetings, that sort of thing. There might be some opportunity to, at least as a group, provide some input to them that might be helpful. What I will try to do is shoot off an email to the engineer, the town manager, and the project manager from Fussin O'Neill to say, where can the Conservation Commission plug themselves into this process, if at all, and if no problem, and if so, when would be the most appropriate time to do that? I think what would be helpful in the interim is at least going off to that sewer department, sewer authority part of our website. It's right on our homepage. Just go under departments and find sewer. And look at that right-hand side list of hyperlinks. Just at least click on the one that talks about I think it's the 2017 facilities map. It's just a really nice, colorful map. You saw it out front. Just to understand what are the areas that are anticipated for sewer, where the existing lines are. That's just a level of familiarity.
And I think for us, that way we can align that from a conservation perspective. So if, for example, Lake Tioga is not on the short list, it should be. That might be something that we talk about. A trigger, if you think. The other trigger that that I've been working on, it's a hotspot for me is stormwater. So I live on Upper Dam Pond, and we've got Fuss and O'Neill had recommended a $1.1 million project to do eight storm scepters and filtration systems around the pond to deal with aquatic invasive species. So I've developed a relationship with Kevin at Department of Public Works. And I think that we should be plugged into those types of projects that Kevin has on his list as well, because Joe and I were just talking about a couple of things.
Okay.
We're doing work as kind of the go-between between the town and the private citizen, so that they can get test wells drilled on, one is on private property and one is on easement that I think the owner has kind of taken over. So we're working with those private property owners to persuade them to let the town go and do those kind of test sites.
Okay.
So that's what I was just talking to Joe about, but I think any kind of projects for the Department of Public Works that we should be plugged in there as well, especially around stormwater.
Okay. So would you reach out to Kevin?
Mhm.
Okay.
I will reach out to Kevin.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I told Joe that just an hour ago.
Okay.
So.
Matt,
What-
it's 10:07 in case you have, I just make sure you.
I
know
just
the
don't want to
time.
get up and go
No.
while we're still going over.
Well, good. So any other future agenda items? Got some Get Smart homework to do.
Okay. All right. And if people have items, let me or Tom know especially, so that when he's talking to Gail about the agenda, he can put that stuff on. You don't have to come up with things here in your meeting in order to be on the agenda for the future. It's preferred that you do it this way, just because on the record, that sort of stuff. But there's no law that says you can't have other ideas in the interim.
Okay. Public comment?
No one else is there. So
No. Then I'll move that we adjourn the meeting.
It's good.
All right.
thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Hey, thank you.
Meeting is adjourned at 6:52 PM.
Up there tonight.
Yep.